Kitco Mining's special coverage of the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference is brought to you by First Mining Gold.
The Canadian Securities Exchange has some good news regarding the health of the resource sector. I'm with Richard Carleton. He is CEO of the CSE. Richard, welcome to Kitco.
Thank you very much, Michael.
Tell us about the numbers in 2022. Now, we look back at 2022, it was not really the best year for the resource sector, but you have some news and numbers regarding the health of it.
Well, there was surprising strength.
Yeah.
Maybe not in trading or asset valuations, but you mentioned we did have 101 new companies list on the exchange over the course of the year, and I believe 74 of those companies were actually mining companies. And typically, of course, they're earlier stage, exploration stage companies. And these are companies that are looking for really a broad portfolio of minerals, unlike past years where there's been a greater focus on precious metals.
I think the other good news about it as well too is that there was a lot of them, and then there was also the fact that the kind of the financing, so that they were small, it was also broad-based. Is that correct, Richard?
That's absolutely right. The number of transactions that for financing in total, I think, raised about $500 million. And that's both existing companies and new companies coming onto the exchange. But that was hundreds of individual transactions to get to that number. So again, it means that there are a lot of projects that are being backed by investors in the Canadian market.
We'll take a little bit more information about them, like where are they mostly based in, where their headquarters are, and then also what are their projects, or what is their focus?
Well, more than half are headquartered in British Columbia, as you would expect, given obviously the local strength and capability
Here
in the markets.
Vancouver Resource Investment Conference.
Indeed,
Yes.
indeed. But I think, again, to nobody's surprise, there's a real drive to onshore projects. And that means Canada, the United States, and the nearer portions of Central America and South America. And that's really a big switch from what we've seen really over the last few years. And again, coming out of the pandemic, I think there were a lot of companies in the chain that decided, look, we would like to invest and be supplied with critical minerals from what we would think of as politically reliable jurisdictions. And so again, no surprise. The other big theme, of course, is that whether you call them the battery metals or the electrification of the economy thesis or what have you, but copper and nickel projects in particular found favor with investors. And I think the interesting thing, as we were talking earlier about these projects, is many of them were drilled 50, 60, 70 years ago. And there is a commercial ore body there at present prices for these commodities. And so the likelihood of these projects, in fact, being advanced to production stage in what we would think of as a near term in this industry is actually, I think, quite high. And that's a very good news story, I think, for the Canadian economy in general, and of course, investors in the mining space in particular. But we've also, of course, seen other investments in the rare earths, in some of the more esoteric battery metals, and of course, lithium and graphite. And again, as we were talking earlier, there's another generation of lithium companies coming to market. And as I say, we're going to see the folks that advocating for hard rock lithium extraction against the alluvial extraction is going to be a bit of a battle of the century, I guess, in that space.
Richard, let's step back and we're going to talk about the Canadian Securities Exchange as well. You're in North America, there's other exchanges in the continent here. Talk about how you position Canadian Securities Exchange. Where is it targeted? What's the services that you provide?
Well, we're a 20-year-old overnight success story is how we like to phrase it. Again, like the mining industry, nothing happens all that quickly. But when you do make it, it's obviously great. But we were and we continue to be focused on early stage companies coming into the market. So we offer a rule structure, a regulation approach, and frankly, a price point which meets the needs of early stage exploration companies. And it explains why we've been so successful against our competitors over the last couple of years in particular, in winning the lion's share of new mining companies that are coming into the market. Now, one of the things that we have to do as an exchange is really help these companies communicate their stories, their unique proposition to the marketplace, because it's an incredibly busy field. I mean, even on the Canadian Securities Exchange, we have 340 mining companies in total, I believe. Maybe 342 now, with a couple more today, actually. But it's a very, very crowded field, and it's a very difficult job for the management of these companies to engage with the shareholder population, the investor population, to try to, again, explain why their company is a unique approach, why it's a sound investment, and it's an exciting project that they're looking to develop. So we have to provide the platforms to help them engage with the investor population, and not just in Canada, but frankly globally, which is really interesting. And we use social media. We have in-person events. We do all sorts of things to help them engage with the investor community. So that's part of the proposition. The other big thing that we're doing this year is we're actually engaged in the first significant rewrite of our listings policies in our 20-year history. And we're literally on the doorstep of completing that project at this point. And investors and people who follow the markets will see two big changes, really, as a result of these new rules. The first one is we're updating the rules for inclusion, or at least eligibility for listing. So we've bumped up some of the numbers, which haven't been adjusted in 20 years. We want to see more shares outstanding. We want to see more shareholders with the companies as they are listing. So it makes it, the bar gets a little higher, but the outcomes are better, because with broader distribution, it means more liquidity, more effective price discovery on the exchange, and again, a better chance for these companies to make a go of it as a public company. The other part of that project is to create a senior tier, because with a 20-year history now, some of our companies have grown to be of pretty considerable size. Now mostly in the cannabis sector, but companies with multiple billion-dollar market caps. And so we have to provide a framework that's consistent for the regulation of senior companies with exchanges in the United States and Canada that obviously focus on more senior companies. Now, we have now 6 companies which are interlisted with NASDAQ. So we're getting up there in terms of the size and the complexity of these companies, which is a great news story. We're really excited for those issuers. But as I say, we do have to provide that framework that avoids what people would call regulatory arbitrage amongst the different listing platforms in Canada.
Richard, you would know best about best practices for these companies that are marketing themselves and then telling their stories. And I think it would also be useful to investors as well, too, to kind of invest, to assess the companies that they're looking at. What do the companies do best? What are some principles that they do best in terms of actually kind of rising to the top, or actually telling an effective story, and then, keeping themselves viable?
Well, there's the whole, you have to be constantly communicating.
Yeah.
And as I tell companies when they first list, this is not the end. This is actually the start of the job here. Yeah. Right? This was not the goal. This is just the beginning to put yourself in a position to achieve the goal. So the companies really do have to understand that, yes, it's not all about the geology and going through the bush and getting the drill going and working with the lab to get the results back on a timely basis and so on. It is really about how do you engage with that investor population? Have you identified the centers of influence that will back stories? They're obviously lead investors in different markets in Vancouver and Calgary and Toronto and Montreal and New York and so on, that will lend their prestige to your company if you're able to successfully persuade them that you've got a good project underway that merits that level of investment. We again offer the platforms to assist them in telling the story. We actually work with company management on coaching them up for presentations, which has been very successful. We've seen a number of companies. I've witnessed a number of companies get way better at the pitch process as a result of doing that. There are some other things that at a technical level, and comparing against your peer group, how effective are you at controlling costs? Right? What percentage of the money you've raised actually goes into the ground? And the management teams that are successful in doing that, they really stand out. And that demonstrates, I think, how committed, how serious you are with the particular project that you are pursuing. And those factors can really help distinguish you from what is, in fact, a very crowded market.
I'll reach out to you for some of your video coaching services. But I want to finish, Richard. Lastly, is that we've had a great start to 2023. We've had these great precious metal prices. We've also had the great base metal prices. What are some of the top trends, or what's your crystal ball say, or what are kind of some milestones that you're looking for in 2023?
Right. Well, as we said earlier, my crystal ball works out about 6 months. So the applications that we get now, that we begin working with the companies, they're going to be listed in May, June, and July. And so what we see is a continuation of what we saw in the third and fourth quarter in 2022, which is, again, a broad-based series of mining companies coming to market with early-stage projects. Generally speaking, again, in Canada, in the United States, nearby in Central and South America. And that is clearly going to continue for the foreseeable future. Yeah, we see some interesting things in ag tech, in a lot of mergers and acquisitions activity of the small variety in the cannabis space, which of course is another area that we're known for. And I think there'll be some interesting plays in the technology space, particularly applications of artificial intelligence technologies. And because that's getting people really talking with the ChatGPT developments over the last little bit. So again, I think we may not see in aggregate a tremendous amount of money raised like in the 2020 and 2021 levels. But again, very healthy flow of new companies coming into market. And as I said, we are seeing the majority of those companies in the Canadian marketplace.
Richard, congratulations.
Thank you very kindly.
My name is Michael McCrae with Kitco Mining here at the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference.
Kitco Mining's special coverage of the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference is brought to you by First Mining Gold.